Sujan Chinoy, Chair of the T20, also Director General of the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, Shri Samir Saran, President of the ORF and the nodal point for the T20, Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi, DG of the RIS, Mr. Rohan Jetli. I see many of our other friends also are here, Dr. Manjeet Kriplani of Gateway House, Dr. Pradeep Mehta of the Cuts International, distinguished participants, guests, friends. Namaskar and good morning. At the very outset, let me felicitate the T20 for hosting this mid-year conference on sustainable development and the G20. It is indeed a very appropriate time to take stock of where we are and how we can proceed in the remaining months before we reach a conclusion of our presidency. And of course, we are very much looking forward to the recommendations that emanate from the T20 group. The T20 is, of course, seen as the brains trust of the G20 process, with many of the ideas and suggestions that are incubated at the T20 forum finding their way into the ministerial meetings and eventually into the G20 summit. It is an invaluable process that shapes and imparts new direction to the G20 dialogue process. And as I said, having crossed the halfway mark of our presidency, from the time that we began our presidency until the summit, it is indeed a good time to take stock of what we have accomplished and the way forward. And this 3-day session, I understand, has covered and will further be deliberating on some of the key themes that form part of India's G20 process and priorities. And these priorities include health, accelerating SDGs, blue economy, urbanization and local governance, green growth, technology for development, reformed multilateralism, international finance, gender, and its interplay with green transitions. And sustainability is an important thread that actually runs through all of these priorities. The Sherpa, Shri Amitabh Kant, did speak on the priorities which are essentially linked to growth, to the SDG process, to reformed multilateralism, digital transformations, and women-led development. And in each of these processes, what we find is that sustainability is a prerequisite and something that is that binds all of these priorities. And of course, the ultimate fabric will also have an important consideration of what sustainability and sustainable development involves. And Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji has on several occasions highlighted the aspect of India's long association with and practices of sustainability. And I want to just draw your attention to some of those remarks because I think it's relevant to our discussions today. At the UN Environment Day, the Prime Minister had referred to that sustainable development, the harmony that our ancestors had maintained with nature. And he had also said that in India, we have equated nature with divinity. In other words, our gods and goddesses have plants and animals associated with nature and with them. And he, in this context, said that the need of the hour is human-centric, collective efforts, and robust actions that further sustainable development. And he recalled Mahatma Gandhi, who had talked about, who had, in some senses, also talked about a zero-carbon lifestyle. And the President urged that we pick up the most sustainable options in our daily life. And in that context, he said that our planet is one, but our efforts have to be many. In other words, one earth, many efforts in attaining what we wish to attain in terms of sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles. We had an important outreach to the developing countries. India, in many senses, is perceived to be the voice of the global south. And in January this year, we had what is called the Voice of Global South Summit, which was an outreach to about 125 countries that participated in this, including many of the heads of states and governments of developing countries. And on that occasion, the Prime Minister has said that we all pick up the most sustainable options in daily life. And our planet is one, of course, in that context, he said the need of the hour is to identify simple, sustainable, and scalable options and solutions that can transform our societies and economies. And with such an approach, he said we shall overcome the difficult challenges, whether it is poverty, universal health care, or building human capacities. And in that context, he also said, we agree that apart from controlling emissions in production, it is equally important to move away from use and throw consumption towards more environment-friendly, sustainable lifestyles. India views the countries of the global south as the most vulnerable and disadvantaged as they battle multiple challenges like poverty, climate change, and meeting the exacting sustainability standards set by the developed world without adequate resources and technology. And this is why we had decided to engage the Global South countries early in our presidency. And I think this was an important occasion for us to get a sense of their aspirations, their expectations, and their concerns, of course, in today's very difficult socio-economic and geopolitical environment. Earlier, when the Prime Minister unveiled the G20 logo of our presidency, he drew a link between sustainable development and India's G20 priority of green development, climate finance, and lifestyle for environment. And he said we have to make sustainable development a part of individual life instead of mere government systems and expand it further. Environment must become a global cause as well as a personal responsibility for us. We had in the previous panel, I think, an interesting discussion on the issue of a holistic view towards the issue of climate change. There's not only climate actions, but also the issue of sustainable production and consumption, SDG 12, and about how we can look at the entire issue of dealing with the issue of climate change in a manner that is comprehensive and involves people and not just governments and systems. And the importance of sustainability is critical in that regard. And this conference affords us the opportunity to refocus and rededicate ourselves to building solutions that go beyond complying with requirements established by regulators across the globe. And as the brains trust behind the G20, you have a unique opportunity to explore and promote processes and policies that will be considered by the leaders of our countries and implemented appropriately and can help deliver real and radical changes that are needed to help us meet our sustainability commitments and sustainability ambitions. And to create this change, we need to bring together the perspectives of society through civil action groups, thought leaders, hear the voice of business, and temper this with the policy challenges of nation states. And when your recommendations consider the imperatives of not just one country but all and accommodate the nuances of each perspective, we can create a multiplier effect, simplifying operations for organizations and equipping them to meet and exceed regulatory standards. I also want to take this opportunity to remind ourselves that true change will come not only through winning the hearts and minds will only come actually through winning the hearts and minds of people. So behaving sustainably becomes the norm, and in fact the expectation we all have of ourselves and each other. And there are several examples of how this has been achieved. The Swachh Bharat program, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, is one such example in India. The Clean India policy that was implemented and is being implemented. The transformative change that has been brought about has several components, and one of it is visionary leadership, another is financial commitment, decentralized delivery to account for local needs, and most importantly, social mobilization. So how can sustainable development policies be implemented in a manner that is holistic is also very important. And we must make sure that the lessons from successful programs are learned and we study those that have not been as successful. So we do urge all of you to ensure that continuity of your influence and ongoing actions on many of these issues is given the momentum and importance that it deserves. And when it comes to issues like climate change, it is really a call to action. Its impact is no longer an event in the distant future, but here and now. Even if we are able to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, there will be significant impact on climate ecosystems and human society. Controlling climate change is undoubtedly a key priority for everyone in the world, for our sake and the sake of our future generations. But it is equally important that we do so while continuing to meet all the sustainable development goals agreed. We must not only save the world, but make it better for everyone and for future generations. Addressing the challenges we face cannot be the sole remit of any one country or agency. It will need the combined efforts of all people through all the institutions, corporate, policymakers, philanthropy, and most important, civic action. There are two quotes of Mahatma Gandhi that come to mind at this point. One is when he says we must care about the world that we will not be able to see. And the other, when Mahatma Gandhi says man becomes great exactly in the degree to which he works for the welfare of his fellow men. This is the challenge we must rise to. As the task forces in the Think 20 come together to review their discussions and to examine how you can move forward with a draft declaration at the T20 summit. I wish all of you the very best in your deliberations, and I thank you for your attention. Namaskar.